The Nature of Belief by Frost in the Warren. Chapter 5. I've hung a wish on every star. Past. Jack had been working up the courage to touch the sand for weeks now. The sand was such a beautiful thing for the children, especially these days when everything was so hard and kids were being forced to act less and less like children each day. It was a fantastic escape for them in such troubling, hunger-filled times. To dream. His lips parted in awe, golden light gleaming off his eyes. He crept carefully closer until the sand was hovering just in front of his eyes. He smiled brightly, chest light with wonder and joy. He followed the line of sand back to its source with his gaze. The cloud of sand was a beacon in the night. From here he could only catch glimpses of the little man on top. Jack spared a thought to gliding up there to watch, but decided against it. It wouldn't see him anyway. Directing his gaze back to the line of sand in front of him, Jack bit the inside of his lip and took a deep breath. He reached out with slim, hesitant fingers and brushed his hand through. A golden dolphin burst forth, trilling and squeaking gleefully. Jack laughed, spinning to keep his eyes on the creature as it circled him. He bounced on his heels, whooping with excitement when the dolphin began doing flips and tricks in the air. He held his arms out imploringly, and the dolphin willingly came into his reach. It nuzzled his neck and cheek. As Jack held on to the sand dolphin, his grin trembled. Was this what a hug felt like? Releasing a shaky sigh, Jack let go and steadied his smile. Glorying in the joy he felt in his heart and that tingled in his toes and fingers, he bounced away on the roof. "Let's play!" He tapped the dolphin with his staff. "Jack, you're it!" The dolphin whistled, and the game began. Sandy's attention perked. One of the sand streams had been disrupted. It had only been the barest flicker, but he definitely felt a dream remove itself from the sand. He couldn't feel it much anymore. He never could once they'd been delivered. Not like he did with the sand immediately in his control. But the streams were connected directly to him on his cloud, so their changes were noticed quickly. Curious, he created a smaller cloud and flew from his spot in the sky to the stream. Ah, there. A dream dolphin was flying around a rooftop, flipping and twirling and dodging? Was it playing? Sandy halted in front of the dolphin, which had paused at his approach. There was a flicker from the corner of his eyes, and he turned towards it. There was nothing more there. He could have sworn. Jack gripped his staff across his chest. The Sandman was watching Jack's dolphin, oddly, a question in his calm eyes. He shifted on his awkwardly. Well, this was a little uncomfortable. The Sandman turned toward him when he moved. Jack froze. He can't see me, he told himself. He can't see me, can't see me, can't see me. But Babytooth does. A traitorous part of himself that refused to let him stop trying murmured. Babytooth. The idea took root and spread. He'd only seen her a handful of times in the past 30 years or so, but maybe, just maybe, someone had changed because of it. Maybe there was a chance. So Jack opened his mouth and repeated the words that sometimes felt like they were the only thing he knew how to say. "Can you see me?" The Sandman cocked his head and Jack's throat clenched. There was hope, sweet, bright, gentle. The Sandman's shoulders heaved a silent sigh, and he dispersed the dolphin before flying back up to his cloud. Selfish, damning, broken hope! Jack watched him leave with blank eyes. He flicked his gaze to the sand for a second, then pulled up his hood of his cloak and turned away. He called Wind to carry him home to his den. Where he was usually light, he felt heavy in its grip tonight. When he landed, it was firm. He walked to the bed of blankets and pillows and pushed it from under the skylight entrance. He stopped when it was in shadows and collapsed atop it. He didn't want to look up at the moon tonight. Jack grasped amongst the covers until his searching fingers hit smooth wood. He pulled the angel to him, then sought once more. This time he found fake fur. He gripped the stuffed tiger, a cast-off from a spoiled child who tossed it aside in favor of something else, something better the moment it had been torn. Jack had taken and fixed it out of pity, but kept it out of empathy. He stared at the wall, cuddled with his staff and toys and blankets, like a child. For a few days, it was all he did. Present. When Jack woke, he was in the sleigh. He groaned as he fought to stand, muscles stiff and aching, bones popping. Everything hurt. He clenched his eyes shut against the pounding headache that throbbed at the base of his skull and temples. He gripped the side of the sleigh. He took deep breaths that smelled of animal and fuel. As the headache faded into something manageable, he looked around. He was in a barn of some sort. To his left were stables with dozing reindeer. His lips twitched, and he wanted to pet them, but refrained. He had other things to worry about. Sandy. Tears gathered in his eyes, and he shook them away. No, that was not the time. Jack climbed out of the sleigh, stumbling and using his staff to maintain his balance. He felt better by the time he got to the door, his wobbles smoothing out until he felt secure with his own 2 legs. Jack exited to find himself in the same place they'd taken off from to get to the Tooth Palace. He wandered around until he heard noises, bells, and followed it. What he found was a funeral. Jack stared at the candles and mourning with a darkened expression. "He's not dead!" He walked into the circle they all formed and glared at the guardians. "Why are you acting like this? He's not dead!" Jack's breathing became harsh. "He can't be! He saw me! He can't be gone!" This time Jack couldn't hold back the angry tears as he watched them hold hands. But it was the tears in Bunny's eyes that made him snap. He shouted, "How can I have any hope that you'll ever believe in me if you won't even believe in him?" Jack flew away, stewing in his grief and his anger and hating that even in a time like this, he could feel so selfish. The main floor of the workshop was empty for once. If they weren't at the ceremony, the Yeti were in their homes around the workshop with their families. Phil had no family to go home to, but he wasn't high up enough in command that he felt comfortable attending the ceremony either. He hadn't known the Sandman well, but he'd known him nonetheless, which was why he was here. He didn't want to go to his empty home and grieve alone, but he didn't want to step in on something he felt he didn't belong at. So he stayed here, caught between the two. The knife was sharp. He was careful with it as he carved. A block of dark brown wood was steady in his large hands, moving with professionalism and ease of experience as he whittled away with it. He wasn't too sure what he was making yet, but he guessed it was some kind of animal. He felt his hands move without thought. Phil paused in his work when he sensed something cold settle at his side on the workbench. He glanced over. Nothing there, as usual. He turned back to his carving and suddenly knew exactly what he was making. Setting out with new purpose, he continued to work. For 2 hours, there was quiet. When he finished, Phil sanded the edges to smoothness. Then he placed the horse, the size of a human's palm, on the table in front of the cold presents, a thank you for the company he hadn't known he wanted. He left it there and went to his home to rest, no longer wary of being home alone. Whatever it was probably grieving too, after all. He wished he had a name he could give it. Jack picked the tiny horse up and cradled it in his hands. He really did like Phil. He almost regretted the long reprieve he'd taken from coming to the pole. As he observed the creation Phil had carved in so short a time, he almost laughed. Phil was really talented. He had such an eye for details. He just had trouble with expressing it most of the time. He was so oddly logical and practical for a toy-making Yeti. Jack wondered if Phil might have some confidence issues too, deep down. He sniffed and wiped his eyes on his sleeve. He tucked the horse into his pocket where it clinked against the pockets of the contents. He took a shuddering breath and stood up. He needed to find the Guardians. Something needed to be done. The Guardians had reconvened in the globe room. Jack sat beside the main console, staff stuck between his crossed legs and leaning against his shoulder. The storm in his chest wasn't raging anymore, slowed by grief and a growing cold calm, but still brewed. It had been quiet for a while, no one willing or wanting to speak, but eventually all silences were broken. "Someone has been helping us," North said. He never took his eyes off the globe and its flickering lights. Jack looked at him. "What?" Tooth flew closer. "Helping us?" North nodded. "The explosion in last battle was not caused by us, and nightmare horses should have been greater, but their numbers dropped quicker than expected." He stood in front of the console, wrapping his fingers on it. "Someone has been helping us," he repeated. Tooth pursed her lips in thought. "It was a bit like that at Tooth Palace too, wasn't it?" Another nod from North. "The fifth Guardian!" Bunny hopped onto the railing around the globe. "What would they show themselves then?" "What?" Jack snorted. "Who's hiding?" North shrugged. "Who knows? But whoever it is, we can still count as good thing. We need them, especially now." Jack's eyes widened. "You need me?" The thought made something small and bright unfurl in his smile. "Well, whoever they are," Bunny said, "they'd better be ready, 'cause Easter is tomorrow and I've got a plan." A smirk spread on his face. "How's your lot feel about painting some eggs?"